Imagine being one of the wealthiest men in Rome and deliberately choosing to sleep on the floor, eat stale bread, and wear rags. Your friends think you've lost your mind. Your servants are confused. But you're smiling because you've discovered something that would make you more powerful than your wealth ever could. This was Seneca's paradox. A man who owned palaces trained himself to live like a beggar. A philosopher who advised emperors practiced poverty like a spiritual discipline. And the reason why will completely change how you think about comfort, pain, and what it actually means to be free. Today, we're diving into one of the most counterintuitive teachings in Stoic philosophy, that your willingness to suffer is the secret to never suffering again. Seneca the Younger lived one of the most dramatic lives in ancient Rome. Born into wealth and privilege, he became the most influential philosopher of his age, advisor to Emperor Nero, and one of the richest men in the empire. He was exiled, narrowly escaped death more than once, and was ultimately compelled to end his own life by the very emperor he had mentored. But here's what's fascinating. Through all of this, the wealth, the power, the exile, the death sentence, Seneca remained psychologically unshaken. Not because he was naturally tough, not because he was emotionless, but because he had trained for suffering when he didn't have to. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" This wasn't masochism. It wasn't self-punishment. It was the most practical form of mental training ever devised. And modern psychology is finally catching up to what Seneca knew 2,000 years ago. We live in a world that's engineered one goal above all others: the elimination of discomfort. Too hot? Adjust the thermostat. Hungry? Food delivered in minutes. Bored? Infinite entertainment in your pocket. We've created paradise and accidentally made ourselves weaker than any generation in human history. Seneca saw this pattern in ancient Rome. As the empire grew richer, its citizens grew softer. They couldn't handle setbacks. They panicked at minor inconveniences. They had everything and were miserable. So Seneca did something radical. He turned pain into a practice, suffering into a skill, discomfort into a competitive advantage. What you're about to learn isn't about becoming some ascetic who rejects all pleasure. It's about becoming someone who enjoys pleasure without being enslaved by it, who can lose everything tomorrow and still be okay, who is genuinely free because nothing external controls their well-being. Let's explore Seneca's suffering paradox. Chapter 1. The Wealth Trap. How Comfort Breeds Fragility. Seneca wasn't born a philosopher. He was born into one of the wealthiest families in Rome, in the province of Hispania. His father was a famous rhetorician. His path to power and privilege was guaranteed from birth. But young Seneca was sickly. He suffered from severe respiratory problems, possibly asthma or tuberculosis. He was so ill that he later wrote about contemplating to take his own life. This early encounter with pain became the foundation of his philosophy. While other wealthy Romans were insulated from hardship, Seneca couldn't escape it. And in that inescapable suffering, he discovered something profound. He wrote, "It is in times of security that the spirit should be preparing itself for difficult times. While fortune is bestowing favors on it, then is the time for it to be strengthened against her rebuffs." Think about this psychologically. When you're comfortable, what happens? You become sensitized to smaller and smaller discomforts. The person who lives in perfect climate control finds a slightly warm room unbearable. The person who eats gourmet meals daily can't stomach simple food. The person who never experiences hardship is devastated by minor setbacks. Modern research calls this distress intolerance, the inability to handle negative emotions or uncomfortable situations. and it's epidemic in comfortable societies. Studies show that people raised in highly comfortable environments have lower resilience, higher anxiety, and less capacity to persevere through challenges. Not because they're weaker by nature, but because they've never trained the psychological muscles that handle adversity. Seneca observed this in Rome's elite. They had everything: wealth, slaves, luxury beyond imagination. But they were terrified of losing it. They were slaves to their comfort. One bad business deal, one political shift, and they collapsed psychologically. He realized the terrible irony. The more you have, the more vulnerable you become, unless you practice having nothing. We move on to Chapter 2. Voluntary hardship. Training for disaster. Here's where Seneca's practice gets radical. He didn't just philosophize about hardship. He deliberately engineered it into his life. Once a month, he would set aside 3 or 4 days for what he called poverty training. During this time, despite being one of the wealthiest men in Rome, he would sleep on the floor or a hard cot instead of his luxurious bed. Eat the cheapest, plainest food available. Stale bread, simple porridge. Wear rough, uncomfortable clothing. Live as if he had lost everything. His wealthy friends mocked him. His servants didn't understand. But Seneca was conducting an experiment that would prove life-saving. He wrote, "Set aside certain days to practice poverty and really experience it. Let the pallet be a real one and the coarse cloak. Let the bread be hard and grimy. Endure all this for 3 or 4 days at a time, sometimes for more, so that it may be a test of yourself instead of a mere hobby." Notice his language. A test of yourself instead of a mere hobby. This wasn't performative suffering. It was systematic training. Why does this work? Modern psychology has extensively studied what's called stress inoculation. Just like vaccines expose you to weakened viruses to build immunity, exposure to manageable discomfort builds psychological immunity to future hardship. Research on resilience training, used by military special forces, elite athletes, and high-performance professionals, follows this exact principle. Navy SEALs don't wait until combat to experience extreme stress. They deliberately create it in training. When they face real danger, their nervous system recognizes the pattern. I've been here before. I can handle this. Seneca was doing stress inoculation 2,000 years before psychologists named it. But here's the deeper insight. He wasn't just preparing for external disaster. He was solving an internal problem, which leads us to Chapter 3. The fear beneath comfort. What you're really protecting. Seneca understood that our attachment to comfort isn't really about pleasure. It's about fear. We're not addicted to soft beds and gourmet food. We're terrified of what it would mean to lose them. Every luxury we accumulate becomes another potential source of suffering, because we become afraid of its loss. He wrote, "The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." Think about your own life. What are you afraid to lose? Your home, your income, your relationship, your reputation, your health. Now ask yourself, how much mental energy do you spend protecting these things, worrying about them, anxiously avoiding anything that might threaten them? This is the hidden cost of comfort. The more dependent you become on external conditions, the more you're controlled by them. You're not free. You're a hostage to your own lifestyle. Carl Jung explored this through his concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. For many people, their shadow includes poverty, discomfort, social rejection, failure. They organize their entire lives around avoiding these things, and that avoidance becomes a prison. Seneca's solution was radical. Deliberately face what you fear. Not to eliminate the fear, but to prove to yourself that you can survive what you're afraid of. During his poverty training days, he would ask himself, is this the condition that I feared? And the answer was always revelatory. The discomfort was real, but manageable. The rough clothes were uncomfortable, but not unbearable. The simple food was bland, but nourishing. The hard bed disrupted sleep, but didn't destroy him. Each time he practiced, he was reprogramming a fundamental belief. I am not as fragile as I thought. I can handle more than I believed. My well-being doesn't depend on external conditions. This is the suffering paradox. By voluntarily experiencing what you fear, you eliminate its power over you. Now comes chapter 4. The Exile. When practice becomes reality. In 41 CE, Seneca's philosophical practice was put to the ultimate test. Emperor Claudius, manipulated by political enemies, accused Seneca of adultery with the emperor's niece. The punishment was exile to Corsica, a remote, barren island. Seneca was stripped of his wealth, his influence, his position in Roman society. Everything he had built was gone. He was sent to live in primitive conditions, cut off from the intellectual and political life that had defined him. For most wealthy Romans, this would have been psychological annihilation. Many exiles became broken, bitter, desperate men. But Seneca, he had prepared for exactly this. All those nights on the floor, all those meals of stale bread, all those days in rough clothing. They weren't theoretical exercises anymore. They were his reality, and he already knew he could handle it. He wrote during his exile, I have had a long-standing acquaintance with poverty. I met her before prosperity came, and so she is not an unwelcome companion to me. Think about the psychological advantage this gave him. While other exiles were struggling to adjust, grieving their lost comfort, Seneca was fine. Not happy about exile, but fundamentally okay. Because he had already lived this experience voluntarily, the shock value was gone. Modern trauma research shows that predictability dramatically reduces psychological impact. The same stressor that destroys someone when unexpected can be managed when anticipated. Seneca had made hardship predictable through practice. But there's an even deeper layer to the paradox. Seneca didn't just survive exile, he thrived in it. During his 8 years in Corsica, he wrote some of his most important philosophical works. He studied, reflected, and deepened his understanding of Stoicism. He transformed what could have been wasted years into productive ones. Why? Because his well-being wasn't dependent on external circumstances. He had trained himself to find meaning, purpose, and even contentment in any condition. This is the ultimate freedom, to be okay, regardless of what happens to you. Chapter 5. The return to wealth, the final test. Here's where most people miss the point of Seneca's teaching. They assume he was advocating poverty and rejecting wealth. He wasn't. In 49 CE, Seneca was recalled from exile by the new empress, Agrippina. He became the tutor to her son Nero, and eventually, when Nero became emperor, the most powerful advisor in Rome. Seneca's wealth was restored and multiplied. He became even richer than before, and he accepted it. He lived in a palace, he had servants, he enjoyed the finest food and wine. He surrounded himself with luxury. This confuses people. If voluntary hardship is so important, why did he embrace wealth? Because Seneca's practice wasn't about rejecting comfort. It was about not being enslaved by it. He wrote, I shall never be ashamed of citing a bad author if the line is good. The same principle applied to wealth. I shall never be ashamed of enjoying luxury as long as it doesn't control me. The difference is subtle but crucial. Most wealthy people live in constant fear of losing their wealth. They're controlled by their possessions. They can't imagine being happy without them. Seneca enjoyed his wealth but knew, through direct experience, that he could be equally okay without it. He could sleep on silk sheets or on the floor. He could eat gourmet meals or stale bread. Neither determined his well-being. This is psychological freedom, the ability to move between wealth and poverty, comfort and discomfort, pleasure and pain without losing your center. Modern minimalism often makes this same mistake. People reject all possessions thinking that's freedom. But if you can only be happy with nothing, you're just as enslaved as someone who can only be happy with everything. True freedom is adaptability, the capacity to enjoy abundance without needing it, to embrace simplicity without requiring it, to be genuinely okay in any circumstance. Now, Chapter 6. The practice and implementation. So how do you actually practice this? Seneca was specific about his methods, and they're applicable today with some modern adjustments. Start with simplicity days. Once a month, set aside 2 to 3 days for deliberate simplicity training. Not every day, that becomes normal and loses its power, but regularly enough to maintain the skill. During these days, eat simple, inexpensive meals, rice and beans, plain oatmeal, basic sandwiches. Wear your least favorite, most basic clothing. Limit climate control, except being slightly too warm or cold. Use no entertainment devices, no phone, no TV, no music. Walk or bike instead of driving when practical. Skip your usual comforts like eating out or ordering delivery. The point isn't maximum suffering. It's proving you can function well with far less than you think you need. Practice micro-discomforts daily. Every day offers opportunities for small, voluntary discomforts. End showers with 30 seconds of cold water. Skip a meal occasionally and sit with hunger. Walk in uncomfortable weather without immediately seeking shelter. Exercise to the point of real discomfort and stay with it. Say no to convenient pleasures you'd normally indulge automatically. Each micro-discomfort tells your nervous system, I am not fragile. I can handle more than my comfort-seeking impulses suggest. Reframe discomfort as training. When you encounter unavoidable discomfort, traffic, bad weather, a delayed flight, instead of thinking, this shouldn't be happening, think, perfect. Training opportunity. Seneca wrote, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Test your dependencies. What do you think you need to be happy? Systematically prove you don't need them. Think you need coffee to function? Stop for a week. Think you need your phone constantly? Leave it at home for a day. Each dependency you eliminate is a vulnerability removed. You're not rejecting these things. You're proving they don't control you. Chapter 7. The paradox completed. Why pain eliminates suffering. Here's the final paradox. The more you voluntarily embrace discomfort, the less you actually suffer. Suffering isn't pain itself. Suffering is pain plus resistance. It's saying, this shouldn't be happening while it is happening. It's being psychologically destroyed by circumstances you can't control. When you train through voluntary hardship, you eliminate the resistance. Discomfort might still occur. It's part of being human. But the suffering dissolves. Seneca faced exile, political intrigue, but he handled each with remarkable calm. Not because he was superhuman, but because he had trained for exactly these possibilities. When Nero ordered his death, Seneca faced it with philosophical composure. He had already practiced losing everything. Death was just one more thing to lose, and he'd prepared for it. This is what Seneca discovered. The willingness to experience discomfort voluntarily makes you resilient to suffering involuntarily. Modern psychology calls this psychological flexibility, the ability to experience difficult thoughts and feelings without being controlled by them. It's one of the strongest predictors of mental health and resilience. The paradox is complete. By seeking discomfort, you find peace. By embracing challenges, you eliminate suffering. By training yourself to need less, you become free to enjoy more. We have more comfort than any civilization in history. Yet we're more anxious and fragile than ever. Why? We've mistaken comfort for well-being. But eliminating discomfort doesn't make us happy. It makes us weak. Research on anti-fragility shows systems grow stronger through stress. Your muscles need resistance. Your mind needs discomfort. Seneca's practice offers a way out, not rejecting modern conveniences, but not being enslaved to them, because suffering is coming. Will you be ready? Start small. Cold showers, skip a meal occasionally, walk in bad weather. Each practice proves the things you thought you needed, you don't. Seneca died in 65 CE on Nero's orders, but not afraid or broken. His death was his final lesson. Proper training lets you face loss with calm. The paradox is yours. Embrace discomfort voluntarily, and you'll suffer less involuntarily. If this resonated, subscribe for more ancient wisdom that's shockingly relevant today. Until then, remember Seneca's question. Is this the condition that I feared? Practice the answer while you still have a choice.